I wasn't so sure that I liked the subject I was given this year, fighting for your grandchildren, because it's personal to me. It is really, really personal to me. I want to tell you, this is not in any way theoretical, and I just want to be able to do this without breaking down as I tell you some of the things that I'm involved in a real fight, my wife and I are with and for our grandchildren. In 1984, we had 3 children, and we wanted to adopt 2 children that we had met. They were 5 and 6 years old, Michael and Angela. We knew that they came from a troubled background, but we didn't really know how troubled that background really was. We adopted them in 84. We were their 16th home that they had been in from the time that Michael had been born. Angela was 6. Michael was 5. Michael had 2 emotions. Those were fear and anger, and he didn't have any others. And Angela was on medication for a stomach ulcer at 6. They had been abused, and we didn't know this at the time. We didn't find this out until later. They had been abused every way a child can be abused. They had seen everything in their life except murder, and I'm not absolutely sure that one of them didn't see that. They had terrible backgrounds. The only thing they had in common was each other. They had held on to each other all those years. I thought, that if you give them enough love, if you enrich their environment enough, if you surround them with Christian friends and family and encouragement, that they will work out fine. Everything will go fine. What I found out is that you cannot erase the experiences of a child. Those things are there, and they will affect them for the rest of their lives. And so when they got into their mid to late teenage years, we began to have problems. Had problems all along, but they became far more significant problems. Drugs and all sorts of other things began to be a problem for us. Angela has gone through all kinds of relationships in her life, had children on top of children, all of them outside of marriage, and has lost most of those children over the course of time. But for us, it became very, very personal. We continued to work with this, but then 3 years ago, on February the 2nd, it was a Saturday night. I'll never forget. It was actually probably tending into February the 3rd. I was getting ready to preach the next day when we had a knock on our door, and a lady brought 2 children to our house, Angela's children. Angela had been taken to jail and was going to spend some time there. And so they brought these 2 children to us. Between the 2 children, they had 1 pair of pants. They had half a bottle or half a jar of formula. They were dirty, they were hungry, they were exhausted, and they were left at our house. We took care of them. Cash was not quite 1 year old. Knox had just turned 3. We've had them ever since. This past December, we adopted them. They are now ours, and they have our last name, and they belong to us. Angela's rights were terminated by the courts, and we are raising those 2 children. I want to tell you something. As heartbreaking as it is in a lot of different areas, it is the joy of our life to have those 2 kids. Now, one turning 4 tomorrow, and the other just having turned 6. They are a great joy. It's not the way I planned on spending my 60s. I can just tell you, I did not have this in mind. I don't even like to calculate. Assuming that Cash does not fail any grades, I will be 78 when he graduates from high school. This is, I can't think like that. But it has been good for us. It's made us think differently and really look at life differently than we have before. And what I tell you is not unique to me. I know that there are probably some of you here who have similar stories that you could tell. According to the 2010 census, 4.7, I believe that's right, 4.9 million children are now living with their grandparents. That 7% of all children in America under 18 years of age are living with their grandparents. That is more than twice the number of people who lived with their grandparents in 2000. This is just going on the census report on what's going on. And I will tell you that grandparents are really willing to step up to the plate and do what they can do. And they will tell you that it brings joy to their life, because it does. But it also brings financial hardship, difficulties, and all kinds of other things and challenges that come. And so we find in our society today, with the breakdown in family and the economic situation that a lot of people are going through, a real need to fight for our grandchildren. And that brings me to the passage that I think probably brought this about. It's in Nehemiah chapter 4, and if you have your Bible, you might want to turn there to verses 13 and 14. You remember the story. In the third group of captives that have come back, Nehemiah led that group, and while others have rebuilt the temple, he's going to rebuild the walls and the gates, and it's a difficult time. He has his plan set out and his people organized, and this is what he tells them. I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall of the openings and set the people according to their families with their swords, their spears, and their bows. And I looked and arose and said to the nobles, to the leaders, and the rest of the people, do not be afraid of them. They're surrounded by enemies. Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, great and awesome, and fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your houses. Fight for your family. We have to be sober, be vigilant, because our adversary, like a roaring lion, goes about seeking whom he may devour. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 8. He is intent. You need to understand this. We are not living in a neutral world. In this world, Satan is determined to destroy your grandchildren. He is determined. When you think about the words that are used about Satan, he's called the adversary, he's called the accuser, the tempter, the murderer, the roaring lion, the god of this world, and the thief. He's focused on your family. And he wants to take your grandchildren. Maybe your grandchildren don't live with you. Maybe they're not even close. Maybe they're in a different city. We're living in a time where people are spread all over the country. I have grandchildren that are in South Carolina. I have grandchildren that are in Portland, Oregon. I have grandchildren that are in Texas. I have grandchildren that are in Pennsylvania. And I have two that I don't know whether to call them grandchildren or children now. But they're in my home, and they're my children. Legally, they're my children. They still think that I'm their granddad, and that's fine with me. But we're having a great time with them. But I'm just telling you, you're going to have to fight. So I want you to make a commitment with me about your family and about your grandchildren, that instead of fighting with your family, you will fight for your family. And I want you to say that with me, okay? I will not fight with my family. I will fight for my family. Say it again. That was terrible. I will not fight with my family. I will fight for my family. Oh, God has so many things to say about grandparents and grandchildren. I want you to listen to some of these things, and then we're going to talk about specific things about how Satan fights us and then how we fight back. And I don't have a lot of time, and I have a month's worth of stuff. So if you'll let me do it, we're going to spend some time, move rather quickly. Proverbs chapter 17, verse 6, children's children are a crown of old men, and the glory of children is their father. Genesis chapter 48, verses 8 and 9, and I love this. Israel saw Joseph's sons and says, who are these? And he said to his father, these are my sons, whom God's given me in this place. And he said, bring them to me and I will bless them. Before we get into a lot of the other stuff, I'm just going to make an aside here. Are you blessing your grandchildren? And I'm not just talking about praying for them. I'm talking about blessing them. Out loud, in front of them, blessing them. Paying attention to them and saying, here's what I see in you and here's what I believe you can become. And I'm going to bless you to become that. That's what I want you to become. These are my dreams for you. Bless your grandchildren. 2 Timothy chapter 1, verse 5, I call to remembrance the genuine faith that's in you, which dwelt first in your grandmother Lois and is in your mother Eunice, and I'm persuaded is in you also. He's talking to Timothy. Oh, the greatest gift you'll ever give your children is to know God. Make sure that you give that gift to them like Lois and Eunice did. Or Psalm 92, verses 12 through 14, the righteous will flourish like a palm tree. He will grow like a cedar in Lebanon. Those who are planted in the house of the Lord shall flourish in the courts of God. They shall still bear fruit in old age. They shall be fresh and flourishing. We're not done, guys. You may be a grandparent. You are not done. And you're needed more than ever now. Psalm 145, verses 3 and 4. Great is the Lord, greatly to be praised, and his greatness is unsearchable. One generation shall praise your works to another, and shall declare your mighty acts. How about this one? Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 9. Only take heed to yourself and diligently keep yourself, lest you forget the things that your eyes have seen, lest they depart from your heart all the days of your life, and teach them to your children and your grandchildren. Can I tell you something as I'm stopping here for again? You are, and your grandchildren are, hardwired to connect on a spiritual level. When your children come into the world, they come into the world where you are preparing to leave the world, and they recognize the impermanence of it. There's some natural bond between children and grandparents that's there like it's not between parents and children. You have an advantage that their parents don't have, and they want to listen to you. Make sure that you take advantage of that. Teach your children and your children's children. In Proverbs chapter 13, verse 22, a good man leaves an inheritance to his children's children. So ask yourself, what kind of inheritance am I leaving? When my life is over, what are my grandchildren going to remember about me? In my walk with God, am I reflecting how I love him so that my grandchildren will be left with that? Do I want my grandchildren to imitate my spiritual life? Are my grandchildren going to want my Jesus? Will my love for God keep on living through my grandchildren after I've already gone from this place? Will I be able to aim them like arrows to a place where I can't go? But I'm the one who loaded it up, and I'm the one who sent them out. The mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him, and his righteousness to children's children, to such as keep his covenant, and those who remember his commandments. And then Psalm 128, I just love it. He says, blessed is everyone who fears the Lord, who walks in his ways. When you eat the labor of your hands, you'll be happy, and it will be well with you. Your wife will be like a fruitful vine in the very heart of your house, your children like olive plants all around your table. Behold, thus shall the man be blessed who fears the Lord. The Lord bless you out of Zion. May you see the good of Jerusalem all the days of your life. May you see your children's children. Peace be upon Israel. The children of Israel have come back from 70 years of captivity, and they've been working hard. In fact, the text tells you as you continue to read, the people had a mind to work. And they've been organized, and they're happy to do it, and they've got the wall built up to half its height, and it looks like everything is going great, and then something happens. Discouragement sets in, and things are getting really tough. It happens because there's still a lot of work to do. And it happens because there's enemies out there who want to stop it. Listen to Nehemiah chapter 4, verses 1 through 3. It happened when Sanballat heard that they were rebuilding the wall, that he was furious and very indignant and mocked the Jews. And he spoke before his brethren in the army of Samaria, and he said, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Will they offer sacrifices? Will they complete it in a day? Will they revive the stones from the heaps of rubbish, stones that are burned? Now Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him, and he said, whatever they build, even if a fox goes up on it, he'll break down their stone wall. They make fun of them, but it's worse than that. In verses 7 and 8, it happened when Sanballat, Tobiah, and the Arabs, the Ammonites, and the Ashdodites heard that the wall of Jerusalem were being restored, the gaps were beginning to be closed, they became very angry, and all of them conspired together to come and attack Jerusalem and create confusion. Don't make any mistake about it. God is after your grandchildren, but so is Satan. And somebody has to stand in the gap. You know, in 2 Corinthians chapter 2, verse 11, Paul said, we will not be outwitted by Satan, for we are not ignorant of his devices. I want to tell you 3 devices that I see here in Nehemiah chapter 4 that Satan was using to discourage these people and that he'll use to discourage you as a grandparent. Fatigue is one of them. Verse 10, listen. The strength of those who bear the burdens is failing. There's too much rubble. By ourselves, we won't be able to rebuild the wall. The word failing here means staggering, stumbling, tottering. These people are dead on their feet. They just can't seem to go any further. The wall is about half its height. That's the way it always happens, by the way. When you're about halfway through, things get tough. The kids are born and you go, oh, how beautiful these children are. And you love your grandchildren. They start growing and things get tougher, don't they? What do you do then? Well, you don't get discouraged, but it is something that will cause you some fatigue, especially if you're one who is the one who can take care of them. In verse 10, they said, we can't rebuild the wall. They're ready to throw in the towel and the trowel. They're ready to give up. They're ready to quit in the middle of that. These people who started out with a mind to work are getting tired. And maybe you're getting tired. Maybe you're getting tired struggling with your children. Maybe you're getting tired struggling to save your grandchildren. And you're tired of trying to correct and inspect and redirect, and it's really hard, and it's not going well. Fatigue will get to you, and Satan uses it. He uses frustration. Verse 10, they said there is too much rubble. Everywhere they looked, broken rocks, mortar, dried out debris. Everything's underfoot. They're having to clear this out all the time. There's always debris. I hear people talk every once in a while about dysfunctional families. Every family is dysfunctional, guys. Every single family on earth is dysfunctional in some area or another. It's not an unusual thing. All of us are in the process of growing and becoming. In your home, in your family, whether it's your kids or your grandkids, I can almost guarantee you that somewhere in your family, maybe it's beyond that to the more extended family, but somebody has a substance abuse problem. Somebody has a bitterness issue. Some people are struggling with defensiveness. Some people have anger issues. Some people don't know anything about delayed gratification. There's all sorts of things that you're going to run into, and the attacks are relentless, and you can get frustrated when you're looking at the rubble. A third device that Satan uses is fear. The children of Israel are now surrounded, and it looks like things are really going to be bad. The enemy is here. We can't keep working. They're getting ready to attack us. We can't get this done. Satan uses all those things. So I really love what it says about the 4 ways you fight back. I want you to listen. 4 ways you fight back. Number 1, you request God's help. Look at verse 4. He says, hear us, O our God. We are despised. Here's what you do. You pray. The first thing you can do, somebody says, well, that doesn't seem like much. That is the greatest thing you'll ever do. You pray. Pray. Verse 9, and we prayed to our God and set a guard as a protection against them day and night. Submit yourselves, therefore, to God. Resist the devil and he will flee from you. You pray. That's James chapter 4, verse 7. I want to say more about it later, but that's enough for right now. Rally your family. Look at verse 13. I positioned men behind the lower parts of the wall at the openings, and I set the people according to their families with swords and spears and bows. And he placed them as families. I really think this is important. He put them as family units. Why is that? Well, I'll tell you why that is. When you have families that have to defend themselves together, that makes all the difference in the world. My father-in-law grew up poor in a very difficult situation, and the only thing he had growing up was pride of family. And so he fought for his family. He was the best dad I ever knew. He was the best grandparent I ever met. One of the greatest ministers I ever knew. Many of you know him, Lynn Cook. But I want to tell you something about Lynn Cook. If you messed with his family, you better mess with him because he's coming after you. That's just the way it was. When Nehemiah put these people together, he didn't split families up. He put them together so that if you're fighting, you're not going to hurt my family. I love what it says here in chapter 3, verse 10, that Jedediah made repairs in front of his house. In verse 23, Benjamin and Hashub made repairs opposite their house. Azariah made repairs by his house. The priest made repairs each in front of his own house. Zadok made repairs in front of his own house. Meshullam made repairs in front of his dwelling. In verse 30, what's he say? You take care of yours. You take care of yours. It's not enough to go and save the world. You take care of yours. Years ago, I was at a congregation where a lot of things were happening all at once. The elders became divided over a couple of issues, and all they did was fight, and they lost their capacity to lead the church during that time. Two of our most prominent families in the church were getting a divorce because the husband of one was having an affair with the wife of the other, and the church chose sides as to who was guilty and why this all happened. And so the church was divided. The deacons weren't doing their work. Our youth minister left because he didn't want to be there when everything blew up. And it was just me at this church. And I didn't know what to do exactly, except that I prayed that God would help us not to divide that church. I would get up in the mornings before daylight and begin to do my work so that I could be in the homes of elders and deacons and preachers and ministers and anybody else in the area, members of that church. Try to hold that together. I organized the work for the deacons and saw to it that they got it done. I worked with the elders to try to get them talking with each other again. We worked through the two families that were going through the divorce, tried to keep the church from splitting. I was determined that it would not split. Every day I'd get up before daylight. I would not get home until somewhere around 10 o'clock at night. This went on for a year and a half. And I can tell you that the church didn't split. Not only did it not split, but ultimately it came together stronger than ever. But my family suffered. And I made the wrong choice. I was trying to save the world. I forgot about my family. I have to tell you, it was the wrong choice. When you're looking at where to start to save the world, you can look right at them. They're right where you are. That's where you start. That's where our responsibility is. Here's the third thing that he told them. Remember who God is. This is verse 14. Don't be afraid of them. Remember the Lord who is great and awesome. He says, you remember who God is. Don't quit. Don't retreat. When the burden seems unmanageable, when it seems like you just don't have any rights. And I will tell you, one of the frustrating things from a legal standpoint is that as a grandparent, you have very few rights. I don't know how it is here in Oklahoma. I can tell you that's how it is in Tennessee. Legally, you don't have much right at all. But oh, the influence you have. You hold on to that influence. Remember who God is and what God can do. Nehemiah knew that the success of the wall was dependent not just on their working on it, but on the God who would give them success when they began to work. And because it was extensive and spread out, he says in verse 20, wherever you hear the sound of the trumpet, rally to us there. Our God will fight for us. Our God will fight for us. Have you thought about the promises that God has made? I don't know. I haven't even been looking to see if it's time or not. But have you thought about the promises that God has made? I'm halfway through my introduction. Listen to this. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 9. Therefore know that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps his covenant of mercy for 1,000 generations to those who love him and keep his commandments. Now, if you consider that a generation is about 30 years, 1,000 generations is 30,000 years. And I'm not saying necessarily that God is saying 30,000 years from today that your righteous life is going to make a difference. And yet it is to say that long after you're gone and nobody even remembers your name, your righteousness will be changing your children's 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 children. It will keep on going and keep on going. Remember your God. Remember his promises. I think it's time to claim those promises. Here's a few. Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 19. I'll call heaven and earth witnesses today against you that I've set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life. Now listen, that both you and your descendants may live. Or how about Deuteronomy chapter 30, verse 2, and then verse 6? If you return to the Lord your God and obey his voice according to all that I command you today, you and your children with all your heart and your soul, the Lord your God will circumcise your heart and the heart of your descendants to love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, that you may live. Isaiah chapter 44, verse 3 and 4. I will pour water on him who is thirsty, and floods on the dry ground. I will pour my Spirit on your descendants and my blessing on your offspring. They will spring up among the grass like willows by the watercourses. And what I get from that is that I have begun more personally and directly than ever before to claim those promises for me. I am no longer praying in desperation to God, and I will admit I have prayed in desperation. I have prayed in tears and fear, and I have prayed that, oh God, everything is falling apart. Help me not to. I don't pray that way anymore, and I will tell you why. I'm claiming the promises. And so here's how I pray. Lord, I choose your promises. I choose life for me and for my family. I choose life. This is what you will do because you promised. God said, as for me, behold, I establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you. Thus I establish my covenant with you. Never again shall all flesh be cut off by the waters of the flood. God saying, no, I'm not just promising this to you. I'm promising this to your descendants as well, and I'm a beneficiary of Noah's life. When he gave the promise to Abraham, it wasn't just to Abraham, it blessed me. In your seed, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. God says, I'm not just going to bless you if you'll be faithful to me. I'll bless your children. I'll bless your grandchildren. You be faithful to me. You hold on to me and see what I do. And I pray that God will do for my children what he promised to the children of Israel. Listen to Isaiah chapter 43, verses 5 through 7. Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your descendants from the east and gather you from the west. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not keep them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I've created for my glory, I formed him. Yes, I've made him. And then in chapter 49, verse 25, I will contend with him who contends with you, and I will save your children. That's my prayer. That's what I'm fighting for. So remember the Lord. Remember his promises. Remember his goodness. Remember his power. Remember that he's great and awesome. And when we can't see a way, he can. Don't give up. Reclaim your family. Again, verse 14 of chapter 4. Fight for your brethren, your sons, your daughters, your wives, and your home. And that's the right fight. Don't be surprised if sometimes it doesn't feel like a war zone. It's supposed to be, I suppose, in our families and sometimes with our grandchildren. But I will say it again. Don't fight with your family. Fight for your family. Fight the good fight of faith. That was passed on from Paul to Timothy. Paul, who had done it, passed it on to them. There's always going to be rubble, and it's always going to be discouraging. There's always junk, but I'm reminded of the fact that before they began to build the wall, the rubble was there. It was halfway through the wall, the rubble got discouraging. Quit getting discouraged. Rubble's always going to be there. It's okay. It's okay that rubble is there. You have a purpose, and part of it is cleaning up the rubble when you're doing what needs to be done. But I don't think that it's any accident while we're dealing with the rubble that Ephesians chapter 6 comes right after Ephesians chapter 5. Somebody said, well, that's pretty obvious. But here's the thing. Ephesians chapter 5, he talks about your family. He talks about wives and their husbands, husbands and their wives, and goes into the first part of chapter 6 with children and their parents and how they are to react to each other and everything else. It's not by accident that later in chapter 6 he says, finally, brethren, be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might. Put on the whole armor of God that you may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. We don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the principalities, against powers, against the rulers of this darkness, against the spiritual host of wickedness in the heavenly places. We have an armor where we can fight. If the Lord builds the house, it's not a vain labor. That's Psalm 127, verse 1. So in the name of God, be sober, be vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking whom he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, and fight. We walk in the flesh, but we don't war according to the flesh, according to 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 and 4. The weapons of our warfare are not carnal. So let me just give you some weapons. Okay, this is a whole list of them, and our time is almost up. I don't have really time to go through every one of these like I want to go through them, but make a list of these. These are good. These are important, okay? Or get the tape or the CD or whatever it is that they have on this. It'll bless you, I think, not because I'm giving it, but just because God says it, and what a difference it will make. Some weapons that we have to use. And by the way, if you want to buy it from me, I'll sell it to you for $19.95. No, get it from them. It'll be great. It'll be great. Here, number one, and we've already mentioned it once, pray for your grandchildren. And let them see you doing it. Pray for your grandchildren and pray in front of your grandchildren, okay? If they're with you, pray with them. If you're in their presence, pray with them. And I want to tell you one of the most wonderful things to me about modern technology. Skype and FaceTime will put you with your grandchildren instantly, no matter where they are in the world. And so we get on FaceTime, and we pray with our grandkids on FaceTime. I can't be with them face to face. I can see them face to face. I want to see them, and I want them to see me praying for them. I want them to experience that with me. And along that line, can I say, and this may be more for the ladies than for the men, can you make a photo prayer journal? And that is a 3-ring notebook that has a section for every single one of your grandchildren. We take several notebooks. But one for every one of your grandchildren, have their picture on it. And on the grandchildren's picture, have information about their school, the church where they attend, their friends, their activities, and have blank pages in each section to record prayer concerns and hopes and dreams for your grandchildren. Ask your grandchildren how you can pray for them. You pray for your grandkids. Here's the second thing. Read your Bible. And again, in front of them, if it's possible for you to do that at all, let them know here's where the answers to life are. Number 3, and this may sound a little odd, but love and respect your spouse. You want to show them what a family really is. And I will tell you that some of your kids don't know what that is. Some of your kids aren't living that way. I know that. They need to see a healthy, happy couple. And that needs to be you and your wife or husband. That's really what needs to happen. Teach them what real love is as they see you interact. In the 4th place, put your family's needs before your own. If you sacrifice for them, but giving them the things they need. I'm not talking about the things they just want. That's a whole different subject. But show them what it means to serve by the way you serve them. Tell them that you love them. Call them on the phone, text or email them, send cards. Put your family's needs before your own. A 5th thing that I would tell you is play with them. There is nothing better of getting close to your grandchildren than having some kind of fun around them. If they're young, play with them that way. I have crawled in the last 3 years 100 miles across my floor. It's been interesting. I have been ridden more times than I can count just in the last 3 years. It's been amazing. Play with them. That's when they talk the most. That's when they really get to know you best and they know that you play fair. Number 6, do what you say you're going to do. Be a person of integrity, whether it's at home or in public. Keep your promises to them, and when they see you make other promises, keep them. Number 7, help them have big dreams. Dream with them about the plans that God has for their life. Open their minds to the stories of heroes and heroines of Scripture who could have quit but didn't, and who became people not only of integrity, but people who have changed the world. Give them something to aspire to in their career, in their character, in their faith. Help them dream big dreams. Number 8, ask them for forgiveness. When you've messed up, or if you just haven't been there, ask them to forgive you. They need to see what forgiveness is really all about, and they see it when they see it in you. Number 9, be an example of sexual purity. I will tell you the number 1 problem, I hate to say it, the number 1 problem of Christian granddads is internet porn. You be a person of integrity. Keep your eyes carefully. Be committed to one person for the rest of your life. Number 10, you be their hero. You protect them, cherish them, and save the day. Live your life in such a way that your grandchildren want to be just like you. I have some other suggestions. I know our time is up. Let me just give you some more. Travel back in time with them. If you get a chance, take them back to where you grew up. Tell them what it was like and how much fun it was when you were a kid, and you hope their life is that much fun for them. Here's the second thing. Share a long-distance lunch. If you can't be there, get on Skype and say, I'm going to eat lunch with you. Go eat lunch with them on Skype. They eat, you talk over lunch. Try that. Take them to the great outdoors. Spend some time outside in God's creation. Introduce them to the joy of giving. Help them. Tell them, look, I want you to be able to give. I want you to go with me. We're going to give some groceries to this family. And I'd like for you to work for me today. And I'll pay you so much, but I want to pay you so that you can go and give that money to someone that you know needs it. And help them do that. Teach them thankfulness. Take them to the local firehouse. Call ahead. Let them bring some cookies or something to them or a card and say thanks for saving lives. Share a cultural experience. Well, the mercy of the Lord is from everlasting to everlasting on those who fear him. His righteousness to children's children. Psalm 103, verse 17. I'm just going to close with one story. Some of you have read The Velveteen Rabbit. I'm going to take the latter part of that in The Velveteen Rabbit. The skin horse had lived longer in the nursery than any of the others. He was so old that his brown coat was bald in patches, showed seams underneath, and most of the hairs in his tail had been pulled out to string bead necklaces. He was wise, for he had seen a long succession of mechanical toys arrive to boast and swagger, and by break their mainsprings and pass away, and he knew they were only toys and would never turn into anything else. For nursery magic is very strong and wonderful, and only those playthings that are old and wise and experienced, like the skin horse, understand all about it. What's real? Asked the rabbit one day when they were lying side by side near the nursery fender before Nana came to tidy the room. Does it mean having things that buzz inside you and a stick-out handle? Real isn't how you're made, said the skin horse. It's a thing that happens to you. When a child loves you for a long, long time, not just to play with, but really loves you, then you become real. Does it hurt? Asked the rabbit. Sometimes, said the skin horse, for he was always truthful. When you're real, you don't mind being hurt. Does it happen all at once, like being wound up, or bit by bit? It doesn't happen all at once, said the skin horse. You become. It takes a long time. That's why it doesn't often happen to people who break easily, or have sharp edges, or who have to be carefully kept. Generally, by the time you're real, most of your hair's been loved off and your eyes drop out and you get loose in the joints and very shabby. But these things don't matter at all. Because once you're real, you can't be ugly except to people who don't understand. And that's what it's all about. Love your children with your very life until you become real.